All right, so to hit things off, let's go ahead and start with a blood sugar roller coaster. Now, your blood sugar roller coaster is referring to how your body is going to break down the nutrition you feed it, the food that you feed it, and the nutrition in that food, and how it's going to impact your energy levels. Now, if you eat certain foods, it'll spike your blood sugar higher and then drop it back down. That increases cravings, whether they're sugar cravings or salty cravings, but just overall cravings of foods that aren't the most nutritious. And then a lot of times that's when it's the easiest and when we want to go ahead and have those foods and choose those foods and eat more than what we need of those foods. And then we see that energy crash. So that's the red line that you see going up and down on this picture here. And what we want to do is have more balanced blood sugar levels. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be stable all day. There is going to be that up and down, but it's going to be a lot more stable if we pair foods together in a way that our bodies like it. So this is using, without getting too complicated, this is a side of biochemistry and how your body reacts to carbohydrates. You can break those down by simple sugars or more complex carbohydrates and fibers, and how it reacts to proteins and fats. All of those things play a role in your blood sugar levels. Okay, so you'll see that green roller coaster, that's where we want to be, that slight increase and that slight decrease. That's a healthy up and down that we see throughout the day, or what we want to see throughout the day. And that's really where I like to start people at. If we can focus on getting on off of the blood sugar crazy roller coaster and we can get on one that's more stable, that's gonna really help our energy levels. And it's gonna also help reduce cravings, which is why you're here in the first place. So this is the approach that is the kind of most straightforward. It's a very physiological driven one, and one that we can really just implement right away. And for a lot of people, this can take that curb off of those cravings. It can keep those cravings away when it's not an emotional kind of craving, or more on the psychological side of cravings. And so starting off, making sure that you have a healthy blood sugar level is the first thing that you want to do whenever you are trying to manage your cravings. You might be asking, okay, this sounds great and all, but how am I gonna do this? So number one is to fill half your plate with non-starchy veggies. So non-starchy veggies are in the workbook, in that handbook, but they include things like asparagus, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, green beans, mushrooms, onions, peppers, salad greens, cherry tomatoes, Roma tomatoes, sugar snap peas, zucchini, cucumber. All of those kind of veggies are going to be very high in water. They're going to keep you well hydrated. Also going to have a significant amount of fiber. Now, fiber is a kind of carbohydrate. It goes with the carbohydrate family, and it's really helpful for, one, getting you feeling full, but two, helping with managing blood sugar levels and helping them to be more stable. Now, it's kind of opposite of the kind of simple carbohydrate family or sources of the simple carbohydrates. Those are things that are going to really spike your blood sugar level and then drop it back down and there are ways that you can incorporate those into your life. Of course, I'm always talking about making sure that you're enjoying your food, that you're still able to have that birthday cake with your friend or your child, enjoying those things in life. But it's just what you want to pair with those and how you want to approach those if you do want to focus on those craving reductions and the energy stability. You want to have about half of your plate being those non-starchy veggies. Now that can be a bit of a challenge, so even if you can't get half of your plate filled with those non-starchy veggies, that is okay. You can still have very balanced blood sugar levels without that. Maybe trying to add at least a handful or two, that can be really helpful, really beneficial for more than just curbing those cravings. And you can cook those in many different ways. One of my favorite ways to cook vegetables is by roasting them in the oven, spraying them with a little bit of olive oil, sometimes not even spraying them, but adding some salt and pepper to them, putting them in the oven, roasting them at about 375 for 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the kind of vegetable they are. They come out amazing. But there are times where you might not have the time to or the desire to make some vegetables in the oven or prepare them in that way. And so I like to keep what I like to call finger veggies on hand. So those are things that you don't really have to do much to prep to eat. So things like baby bell peppers, cherry tomatoes, sugar snap peas, snow peas, baby carrots, those kind of things that you can just grab and put on your plate without having to do much prep. Those can be really helpful. All right, now the second one is to fill around a quarter of your plate with a protein. Now, this is not saying to have this giant plate and to fill a quarter of that with your protein, but just a standard plate. And we will talk about portion sizes in a few modules, but kind of to get you started, a really good point of reference is using your palm. So if you're gonna have protein, so on your plate, trying to get around a palm size of protein or a palm and a half size of protein, that's usually a good portion. So that's really a good size to kind of start with. Now that can be tailored again if we're working one-on-one and tell you exactly what you should be getting in that meal, but that's a good reference starting point. And what I love about using the hand method is that everybody's hands are proportional to their body for the most part. And so if you have a larger hand, if you're a taller person, or if you have a smaller hand, if you're a smaller person, you're going to need either more or less food. And so with those proportions, you'll usually get around the size of protein or whatever it is that we use the hand method for. You'll usually get around the size that you need. All right, now number 3 is to get around a cupped handful of carbs. Sometimes you might need a cup and a half handful or 2 cupped handfuls, maybe even a little bit less. It just depends on what your goals are, kind of what your activity level is, and also what those carbs are coming from. But for the majority, those are gonna come, recommendation-wise, gonna come from things like sweet potatoes, even red potatoes or russet potatoes, beans, legumes, chickpeas, quinoa, rice. If you wanted to have some bread, that's what you would do with that. Again, there's no food that's like off limits, or some oatmeal if you're thinking about breakfast, or Brenner. So there's not always gonna be an easy way to just like grab the food, and I'm not saying that you have to grab the food in your hand, but that can just kind of serve as a visual to approach the carbohydrate sources of food, or the ones that are mostly carbohydrates. Now, a couple of those ones that I mentioned, like beans and lentils and chickpeas and quinoa, those are gonna have some protein in them, which is great, but I want you to count those and think of those as mostly carbohydrates. They have more carbs per as they have a pretty high carb to protein ratio. So we're gonna count those as carbohydrates. Another kind of visual way of doing this is by just having a fist amount, kind of the same idea of that cupped amount. So around 1 to 2 fists amount of carbohydrates. If you're trying to kind of watch what you're eating, trying to be a little bit on the lighter side, then choosing around that 1 cupped handful or that 1 fist amount of carbohydrate dense foods. If you're an athlete, if you're pretty active, if you are pretty hungry soon after you eat, go ahead and maybe try that 1 handful, a cupped handful or 1 fist amount, and then see how you feel. How's your energy? Are you getting really hungry the next hour? If so, that's not good. Go ahead and increase that by half a cup handful, half a cupped handful, or a whole nother handful. All right, and then the last point is by having around 2 thumbs worth of fat. Now again, this is very dependent on where your energy needs are, what your activity levels are overall, what your goals are, but around 1 to 2 thumbs of fat is gonna be a good starting place. So that's gonna come from whatever you want, whether it's avocados or olive oil, if you wanted any kind of nuts or seeds or nut butters like almond butter, peanut butter, cashew butter, all of those kinds. Same thing with even if you wanted to have some actual butter. One of my favorite butters is Kerrygold, which is from grass-fed cows. It tastes delicious. But if you wanted to have that, let's say on your oatmeal or on your toast or whatever, go ahead and have that. Just kind of look at the size of your thumbs and go from there. Now again, we're gonna hit on portion sizes a little bit deeper later on, but just kind of wanted to get you started with that. Now, the reason why we want to have the carbohydrates and the proteins and the fats at every meal is because they work really well together. They work synergistically to give our bodies what they need. So of course they give us all of the micronutrients, so vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, all of that good stuff, the plant nutrition, but how we approach them together is really helpful. It's kind of helpful to know what it's doing in your body. So there are a lot of different ways that they each help the body. Now carbohydrates, they're going to break down pretty quickly, even if they're a complex carbohydrate, and they're going to be a really awesome, really great source of energy. And they're going to be really helpful for your gut health. The little microbes, the microbiome in the gastrointestinal tract, they actually thrive off fibers. So it's really important to get the carbohydrates in and to get that fiber in to have healthy bowel movements. That's really important. That's very important. Protein, a lot of times people think of like getting big muscles when they're increasing their protein, or a lot of people think about the relationship between protein intake and muscle building, but it's also important for even your immune health. And protein really helps to get us feeling full as we are eating. It also helps to keep us feeling full. Now, fat is really, really good at helping us to stay full in between meals. And so you can kind of see how all of them are so important. They all play a big role. And I always recommend getting a little bit of each at all your meals. Now, snacks are a little bit different. For snacks, you don't need a whole meal of everything, right? It's just to kind of take us from one meal to the next, but it does still have a formula. And so choosing some kind of carbohydrate, pairing that together with either a protein or a fat is really helpful. You're getting that quick source of energy, and then you're pairing that with something that's gonna give you more sustained energy. So if you're thinking meals, carbohydrate, protein, fat, and vegetable, non-starchy. And then if you're thinking snacks, carbohydrate, and that can include vegetables, paired with a protein or a fat. So those two things. All right, sound good? Let's go ahead and get to the next. Okay, so now we are going to talk about distinguishing between actual physical hunger versus a more emotional hunger. Now, you could also be experiencing some boredom hunger. That sometimes when you're bored, sometimes cravings will occur, pop up, but we'll be hitting on those in the next video. So hold on for that if you feel like you're eating because you're bored. So if you're having trouble distinguishing whether you're feeling hungry because your body is actually hungry and you need to eat, or if it's more of an emotional kind of hunger, then the number one question that you want to ask yourself is going to be, what are the physical sensations I am feeling? And then where are the physical sensations that I am feeling? So physical sensations can be anything from a headache to stomach rumbles to having low energy physically and having low energy also mentally. And you might have that desire for foods often referred to as junk. So lots of really high sugar or highly salty foods. But at the same time, having a balanced meal sounds pretty good. Like if there was a plate with healthy options and lots of veggies, you would be for it. If it was healthy foods that you enjoy. On the flip side, when you are having more of the emotional hunger side, a lot of times we don't really have that desire to eat those healthier, more balanced plates, those healthier, more balanced options, and we don't have those physical sensations, those same physical sensations. We probably don't have those stomach grumbles. We don't have that kind of low mental energy or physical energy related to food. We don't have that hunger headache. And so at that same time, you also have that strong desire likely for something kind of sweet or salty. Whenever you were emotional, did you ever crave vegetables? Like, did you ever want broccoli when you were sad? Probably not. And if so, that is awesome. But for the majority of people, whenever we're having some kind of emotional eating, we're wanting and craving those foods that aren't necessarily the most balanced or great for us. So the next step is whether or not you determine if it's a physical hunger and you're having those cravings, or if it's more on the emotional side. So if you're having those more intense cravings and you have determined it is a physical hunger based on question number 1, then go ahead and grab a meal or grab a snack. Even if you just ate not too long ago, maybe something has occurred where you need to eat a little bit more. So maybe your exercise routine was changed up a little bit. Maybe you did a little bit more exertion of physical activity, and so your body needs more of that energy. Maybe you had a really bad night of sleep, and so your body's just trying to get that energy in some way. If that's the case, I would encourage you to take a nap, and we're going to talk about sleep in a little bit, but it's okay. Some days we just are more hungry, and that's okay. That's part of being a human. We're not always going to want to have the exact same amount of food every day. So if you are really hungry and you feel like, oh, I just ate, be sure that you are making that meal in line with what we talked about in a previous video about the blood sugar roller coaster. But also, try to grab a snack. So make sure again that that is that balance, that has that balance of that carbohydrate for that quick source of energy, but also that protein or fat to help it be sustained and less of a sugar roller coaster crash. So if you have asked that question and you found that you didn't have any physical sensations and you have determined that it is an emotional hunger, then try to take a step back, maybe drink a glass of water or get a cup of tea, and try to do something that is not related to eating. And then maybe sit down, journal. You don't have to have this fancy journal or anything. It can be even on a napkin or whatever. Just write down what is going on. Write down some of your stressors. So the first step in stopping those kind of cravings is knowing where those cravings are coming from. And it's hard to do any work in an area if you don't know those root causes. So the next thing, after you know what that's coming from, after you've identified it, sometimes you can address those things, but other times you really can't. It's just maybe your season of life right now. And so if you don't have the option or the ability to really change those stressors to either reduce those out of your life or get them out of your life completely, and you're having that emotional hunger, that is okay. It means you're human. And now take a look at that list of 100 things to do when you're not physically hungry. I do want to make a quick point that if you do any one of those 100+ things, whatever, whenever you are physically hungry and you're just trying to suppress your hunger, a lot of times that will backfire and that'll produce even more cravings after a while. So this list is primarily focused on what to do whenever you feel hungry. You might feel hungry or even bored, but you're not physically hungry. You don't physically need that food. So even if you ask these things and you don't necessarily feel any physical sensations, at the same time you don't really feel stressed out, or you don't really feel like it's more on the emotional side, you could still be experiencing that from being bored. If you feel like you get hungry around the times that you're bored, again, take a look at that list. Make your own list. Either take some ideas from that list or create some new ones of things that you can do whenever you do have more of that emotional hunger, whether it's more of being emotional or sad or just being bored. All right, that's it for this lesson. Okay, so now it's time to take the emotional eating side one step further. So one exercise that I love to do with my clients who are struggling with emotional eating is determining where those triggers and those cravings are coming from. Now, emotional eating is not coming from one thing at most times. Usually it's a collection of different triggers that's going on, something that exceeds your threshold, whatever that is, and can make those cravings that much stronger and those triggers that much more of a struggle to deal with. And so emotional eating triggers can come from a variety of places, whether that's coming from overall stress, or it can be some kind of anxiety that's going on, just some anger, feeling lonely even, or feeling like you're just kind of unmotivated. It could be also something that's positive, and you could get emotional eating triggers and cravings around something from a celebration of some kind. So it can come from a variety of places, and it can look also positive and negative at the same time. And this also includes some boredom, some more neutral emotions as well. So the next step after you identify kind of where that's coming from is to write a list of what that emotional eating surrounding that trigger is causing you in a positive way. So if emotional eating didn't cause us some kind of positive feeling, we wouldn't do it. So it's helpful to write down all of the things that it provides you. Maybe it helps you to feel more comfortable. Maybe it helps you to have a little bit more feeling of control over things. It might help you to feel more in the moment or a little bit happier in the moment. But right next to that, also write down lists of cons that it's giving you as well, that emotional eating. So that might look like it zaps your physical energy. It might zap your emotional energy. It might keep you away from doing what you need to do in order to accomplish your goals. And so the next step after that, it's really helpful to use that list of 100 things, 100 ideas of what to do when you're not physically hungry, whether that's coming from emotional eating, more positive or negative, or something neutral like boredom eating. So identify something, a few different things that fit into that list that provide you those positive things that emotional eating does, but doesn't have those same cons. It doesn't have those consequences that really don't help you with your health. So this exercise can be really good to do with a friend, with a coach, with a mentor. That's why I'm here. So if you feel like you need a little bit of help kind of honing in on this specific exercise, let me know. Send me an email, kat@unlockednutrition.com. Let me know. We can get on a quick call and kind of see what might be able to fit to give you those same pros around what you're getting with emotional eating that doesn't provide those same cons. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next module.